Comprehensible input is the idea of taking in speech and writing, also known as listening and reading, in such a way where it will be easier to learn and develop your desired language to reach your goals, such as fluency. Why should you care? You should, because if you ever thought of learning a language, then knowing the idea of comprehensible input will change the way you learn languages, allowing you to achieve higher levels of fluency than your friends who are oblivious to the concept.
Yeah, boy.
If you watched my other videos, you will know that I'm learning German with this concept in mind. But it wasn't always this way. You might see that it has been over a year since I started learning German. At least that's what I've said in my first YouTube video. But that's not true if you really want to know. German was a project for me for 4 years already. 4 years, you ask? And still not fluent? Come on, Amy, why are you slacking? But my motivation, nor my enthusiasm, nor my consistency was the cause for such an obstruction. I did the research and found in my journals that I have never mentioned comprehensible input anywhere. I was unaware of the concept. If you look at my data, I was doing Duolingo lessons daily, reviewing the grammar and translating their prized sentences. But I was just beating my head against the wall. German, I thought, is true Sisyphean labor. Turns out I wasn't inputting enough. I always turned myself down in the prospect of inputting because I was doing the following wrong. I was inputting in utterly incomprehensible materials. I made little to no progress during these times. Only over a year ago, I understood this when I met the Fluent Forever method and the mass immersion approach, now Refold. When I understood what truly needed to be done in language learning, did I ever manage to understand my first TV show episode, YouTube video, and book. If you've been studying a language for years and haven't made much progress, chances are you're not getting enough comprehensible input. And if you don't know what that is, prepare to have your entire language learning world turned upside down. Dr. Stephen Krashen is one of the most well-known researchers in the field of language learning. He's been developing the comprehensible input hypothesis for decades, and his message is simple.
And now I'm going to share with you the most important thing I have learned about language. Probably the best kept secret in the profession. We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible input. We acquire language when we understand what people tell us, not how they say it, but what they say, or when we understand what we read. Comprehensible input, in my opinion, has been the last resort of the language teaching profession. We've tried everything else. We've tried grammar teaching, drills and exercises, computers, etc. But the only thing that seems to count is getting messages you understand, comprehensible input.
Notice how he claims there's just one way to learn a new language. This is because he distinguishes between learning and acquiring, and he believes that acquiring a language is far more superior. When he says learning, he's referring to a standard school curriculum that stresses head knowledge, such as memorizing texts, getting corrected on your mistakes, and trying to remember the corrections, and so on. This is a bad strategy, which explains why so many of us made it through school only to forget all that we learned after the final exam. However, learning a language happens instinctively, without any active memorization. It also allows you to automatically assimilate the vocabulary and grammar as you are exposed to it. As difficult as it is for humans to learn a language, our brains excel at doing so, and the key is comprehensible input. So what exactly is comprehensible input? Listening and reading are examples of input, whereas speaking and writing are examples of output. Now, I'm not here to belittle speaking practices. You must do both, but I do want to underline the value of reading and listening. However, not all input is created equally. Remember, we only learn a language by comprehending messages. I could read one piece from cover to cover and not pick up a single word of Japanese because it's all nonsense to me. But if I watched a Japanese children's show, I might catch up on some of the more frequent vocabularies. This video by Japanese Immersion with Asami is quite comprehensible even for a total beginner. one might get out of the lesson knowing at least a few words.
りょうさんはおまわりさんです。この人はりょうさんですね。りょうさんはおまわりさんです。
おまわりさん policeman.
That's comprehensible input. Now, children's programs and narration of children's books aren't really engaging. The sweet spot is when you come upon information that is both understandable and captivating. That means it's simple enough to grasp and engaging enough to keep your attention, which will be difficult at first because you'll only be able to take in the most basic information. However, you must delve into information that is actually engaging to you as soon as possible. I'm learning German right now, and I would want to get to the point where I could read Goethe and his classical works, because I know I'd be driven to read for hours and hours if I could. But I'm not quite there yet. Graphic novels, on the other hand, help me follow along even if I don't comprehend all of the language. In other words, graphic novels are more comprehensible than standard novels. Now, my comprehension is still not perfect, but that's alright. I rarely pause to look up a term since it takes so much effort, and the context typically fills in the blanks. There are different ways to consume comprehensible input. Between the two extremes of extensive input and intensive input, there is currently a spectrum of options. Intensive input is when you read a book or see a show for the first time, you look up every word you don't understand and study every bit of the grammar. However, the disadvantage of this strategy is that it is extremely sluggish, and every second spent in a dictionary is a second spent on less meaningful information. Remember, there is only one method to learn a language, and it isn't through a dictionary. Extensive input is the opposite end of the spectrum. It is when you simply immerse yourself in the language as much as possible without ever looking up a word. Somewhere in the middle would be a nice medium. However, to optimize your time in the target language, lean more towards the extensive side. Of course, if you see the same word over and over again and still can't figure out what it means, go ahead and look it up. But try to save that for only the most crucial words. Now, no matter what your interests are, you'll be able to get some sort of comprehensible input that's just right for you. Anything that needs you to read or listen in your target language is fair game, including video games, music, meditations, books, novels, scientific papers, Twitter, blogs, or podcasts. Find something you want to do and do it frequently. The beauty of this strategy is that it taps into the power of something you already want to devote a significant amount of time to. What advantage does input have over outputting early? Does inputting really work? Many people would still be skeptical of the whole comprehensible input soup that I've just served. It seems like it's the easy way out of learning a language. Although it might seem like it's the easy way out, that's truly what makes it salient. The following is one thought against the method of outputting early. Input allows you to learn more and more accurately than output alone. There's a limit to how long and how many sentences you can consciously recall in a single day. But with practice, you can learn to read sentences of considerably greater length and number. Part of the reason for this is that, in comparison to your native language, your target language can have the structural capability to generate incredibly long but extremely comprehensible phrases than your native language. Your target language would be skewed towards short sentences as a result of output. When you get in depth in your target language, it might be nothing like your native language in terms of structure, and it's nothing like the textbooks in terms of content. Outputting, I'm afraid, will cause a person to become enslaved to the structure of your maternal language. And in your target lang, there are many, hundreds of ways to say the same phrase. These phrases are not redundant, each has its own nuance. I'm concerned that output-focused practice will compel students to either provide a lot of context for each SRS entry or master narrow vocabulary, terminology, usage range. There are many other reasons, and that can be a different video for that matter, but the main thing here is that you understand the salience of inputting and inputting a lot. Now you know the importance of comprehensible input, you need a clear system that defines the borders of true language learning. Check out this video that assembles comprehensible input into Matt vs. Japan's refold method to start becoming fluent today.